Hey, it's Amelia. I'm doing another Get Ready With Me talking about Halo Beauty because I have more thoughts on it. And I'm just gonna do my normal makeup that I do when I'm pressure tanning. And pan that paletting, if that makes sense. What I want to say first is that when I was watching her clarification video, I felt really bad that people were trying to expose her mom and were basically bullying her. Even if you look at it from the perspective of she's a grown woman and she chooses to be on the internet, it's not appropriate and it's not okay. And this is not me trying to add to that. I felt like she was being very genuine in that video. And I did watch the original video, so I was wrong. The original video is only like 7 or 8 minutes. It's the clarification video that's like 50 minutes. And in the original one, because I had heard people talking about it already, I knew that she was... Start over. She starts it when she first says what it is. She says the quote, "This is Halo Beauty and this works." So like, well, a lot of people are commenting on how that part of the video, they felt like they were being sold to. I didn't have that experience because I already knew it was coming, and I knew that she was going to do a montage in the beginning. So I already knew that was happening. So my experience with the first video was that I was watching it just to see what was going on, and basically she explained what it is, but she didn't go in depth on whether or not there are case studies and all this. A lot of my understanding of what may or may not be wrong in terms of the ingredients and clinical stuff I've gotten from watching other people. So one person who did a really good video on this is Lacey. I think that's her name. If it's not, I apologize. From Spooky Lips and Fat Hips. She's really good. She's an honest YouTuber if you're looking for people like that. And she has a lot more... This is how my eyebrows look every morning. I literally just like intentionally mess up and then clean it up. And I have oil on my face, so it's just gonna come right up. Basically, I'm not gonna repeat what other people said because other people have said it, and I probably learned the thing that I want to say from those people. So I just want you to know that if you're looking for a more well-rounded opinion on it, just know that I have other opinions. It's just I've gotten those opinions by trusting people who have made videos about it, if you know what I mean. But the reason I wanted to film this today is I wanted to talk about the things that I haven't heard people talk about. I was actually gonna talk about this last, but I'm going to talk about it first. So she addressed an ingredient that is meant for brightening, but it's used in Asian beauty as a whitening product, which if you aren't aware, I'm peeling from my sunscreen. In, I believe, multiple Asian countries in India, I could be wrong on which regions this happens in, but there's a culture of skin whitening that reminds me of our Western culture of tanning. So in like the US, Canada, UK, whatever, there's a culture, not so much now, but especially like before the concerns of tanning and tanning salons were like a big deal. like, there's just this thing where everybody wants to tan, and there's so many different types of tanning products because the reason that happens, like, in terms of social science explanation is back when slavery was legal, you were having a paler complexion equated being wealthier because you would be inside most of the day, versus someone who would be working outside. In the Western society, now a sign of wealth is being so wealthy you're capable of going on vacations to places like Hawaii, Fiji, somewhere where it's very warm and you can get a tan. So the Kardashians, I believe, are Armenian, but they're kind of an example of, like, wealthy people that go on vacation and have a deeper complexion. Not black, though, because when you're studying, like, the social reasonings behind things, black is still, like, you know what I'm saying, like, there's still enough discrimination where being that dark isn't in, but being white and tan is. So, but in Asian countries, as far as I understand, because a lot of people still work outdoors, there's something stuck to my eye. It's still a sign of wealth or affluence to be paler in complexion. And she made a comment in the video clarifying that the ingredient was in a small enough concentration amount, whatever, that it would brighten skin but not lighten it. And I don't remember specifically what it was, but she said something that didn't quite make sense. Oh, she said that in the Asian countries where they have these whitening skin masks, face masks, they will say whitening, but in the States we will say brightening. And somebody who is from China, so they're legitimately Chinese living in China, not like you're not Chinese if you're living elsewhere, but you get what I mean. A Chinese citizen who speaks English and is on YouTube, you know what I mean, said that that's actually not true. Those products are meant to whiten like me, like paper whiten. It's essentially skin bleaching, which is equally as damaging as, like, going out and sunbathing. Or I actually am not sure exactly the comparison of how the health effects. Both are bad for you. And it's unfortunate that we live in a world where skin tone has and is continuing to impact people's views of each other. So then it's like a thing that people want to manipulate in order to change their social status or socioeconomic starts with a P. Like, I don't know the word. It's like how you appear rather than what you actually are. So your appearance and how people perceive you, how others perceive you, is influenced by skin tone, which is really unfortunate. But anyways, someone left a comment basically trying to explain to her that she was giving, not that she was giving false information, but in terms of the backlash around that ingredient specifically, rather than addressing it more in depth, she sort of made I believe they referred to it as a snide comment. I didn't think it was supposed to be snide, or maybe they said side comment. I don't know. It was a very quick comment, and it wasn't something she went in depth in. And my point with that is just to point out that she's not very well educated on the culture of that. Like, I'm not well educated on the culture of that, but I know that. Like, I could have said something that's incorrect in what I just told you, but like that's still more information than she has, so I don't know. I felt that it was in poor taste for her to respond to it in that way rather than taking the time to look through it. So the big thing that I wanted to film talking about is whether or not I believe she needs to have a background in the sciences that relate to making vitamins in order to produce them. And I wrote like a 2-page essay on it. Like, do you ever get so irritated or passionate or mad about something that you write an essay? Because that's like literally my life. So I wrote like it wasn't full 2 pages, it was like a page and a half, but it wasn't double spaced, so 2 pages double spaced probably. Basically explaining why I think it is not that it's bad that she's doing this, but that it makes me uncomfortable and I wouldn't want to purchase from her. In the fact that she doesn't have the background knowledge to be able to listen to what the doctors are saying and potentially question them if they're saying something that might be inaccurate. So my way of explaining things, because basically if you don't really know me or that well, which is probably everybody, I have a hard time with being concise. So one of the ways that I like to explain myself is to over-explain and to use analogies. So I'm going to give you an analogy. So let's imagine that I am going to work at a facility or hospital or whatever you want to call it, where there are people with mental illnesses and mental disorders, and they're going to be treated by doctors and whatever and get medication, and it's all good and happy. Everyone's going to get help. That's amazing. And when I go there, I don't have any knowledge of psychology. And I'm just going in as someone... Sorry, I literally can't see without my glasses, and I'm not sure where my brushes are. Oh, I took them out to put them on the side so I could see them right here. So imagine I am there to be this assistant where the doctor walks around with me and we look at the patients and he says what their diagnosis is, he talks to them, whatever, and then he tells me what medications he suggests for that, and then my job is to write it down and fill the prescription and whatever. This isn't a real career, this is a made-up job that fits my scenario in my head, so just go along with it and pretend that's a job someone could have as someone with zero knowledge of psychology. So let's say we come across a patient who claims to have multiple identities and believes they have dissociative identity disorder, previously known as multiple personality disorder, which the reason they changed it is because there's a difference between a dissociative disorder and a personality disorder. So to say multiple personality disorder it made it sound like it was a personality disorder, which it's not. So let's say I have zero knowledge of DID, and he tells me DID isn't actually real, and this person thinks they have it, but they don't, so I think they have this disease, so we're going to give them this medication. And my job is to sit there and be like, okay, that makes sense, because he's the doctor and he knows more than me, and so I write it down, and that person gets their prescription. Oh no, I need to focus on what I'm blending. So my issue with that scenario is that when you do have an education in psychology, you will learn at some point, hopefully, that there's actually debate in the field as to whether or not DID is an actual occurring illness that people suffer from. And the reason this exists is because basically it's so rare when you look at the statistical data available that some people don't even know if it actually exists. It goes a lot more in depth than that, but that's the general idea behind the argument that it's not a diagnosis that should be given out because they don't believe that it's something that occurs. If I were that assistant and I had no knowledge of psychology, I would have no idea that it is possible that he's wrong, because I would have no idea that there's a debate in the field over that. So I would have no knowledge to be like, you know what, maybe this is incorrect. Maybe this person does need that diagnosis. Or just in general, I'm concerned they might be being misdiagnosed, and that's going to influence what medication I give that person. Okay, so are you with me so far on the analogy? Because it's going to get more complicated. So, additionally to that, where's my purse? I can't do two things at once, hold on. Another thing that I don't think I would know if I weren't someone who has an educational background in psychology is that even if someone doesn't fully believe that someone has a diagnosis for whatever reason, it's important to recognize that everything is on a spectrum, and the DSM was written in a categorical format. So when you are going to be diagnosed with something and you are looking in the DSM, or your whoever, psychiatrist, therapist, whoever is looking at it, it's going to list symptoms in a categorical format. So you're going to go to the part of the DSM that talks about that type of disorder, whether it's anxiety disorders, mood disorders, whatever. And it's going to list the symptoms that you need to have it, and it's going to tell you how many of whatever. It's going to be like you need 5 of 7 or something like that, 3 of 5. And then they're going to diagnose you through that categorical method. Something that you wouldn't know unless you're studying psychology or science in general is you might not know. There's always somebody who's going to know things that they normally wouldn't, whatever, because people are smart and they can do research on their own, but whatever. So I wouldn't know if I were in that situation that in reality there's more of a push to look at diseases as being on a spectrum, meaning normal to abnormal, or I guess normal to abnormal, whichever. For DID, for example, if there's a normal to abnormal spectrum of dissociation, like daydreaming is over here with the normal, dissociative identity disorder is over here at the abnormal, whether or not someone believes in DID as being a thing, which I'm not saying I don't. I do think it's real, but whatever, that's not the point. I would still have the knowledge, if I had known that, when he says to me he doesn't believe in it, I would still know that even if the diagnosis that's over here doesn't exist, there's still this spectrum that people can fall on. So someone might be over here in the abnormal with their dissociations. It's just whether or not you call it DID or something else is the question. So that's another thing I would not know if I was just someone going into it and all I'm doing is listening to doctors and going off of what they tell me. Another thing I wouldn't know is if I wanted to, let's say I was questioning him or her. I don't know why I went with a him. In my mind I went with like an older white man who's like very stuck in his ways and like, you know what I mean? Like, it came up with a stereotype doctor in my mind, and now that's what I'm going with. So let's pretend it's this really annoying old man who thinks he knows everything. And that's the guy I'm working with, and I'm skeptical because it just feels like he has made up his mind 50 years ago and he's sticking with his ideas of what is and isn't reality in terms of the field and diagnoses. So let's say I want to look up online information about DID to figure out if it's real or not, because I'm curious and I'm concerned about the people that I'm giving medications to. When I go online, I am not going to know, 1, how to find reputable journals, peer-reviewed articles, whatever, publications. 2, I'm not going to know how to differentiate between things like good evidence and anecdotal evidence, or studies that are done well, but maybe they don't have a large enough sample. There's a lot of things that you learn when you're in school for psychology or in any science about how to read and find good studies in the field. And also they teach you that one study is like one data point on a graph. It doesn't explain the whole story. It's just the best explanation that I've heard from a professor is to think of every study as a historical documentation of something that happened on that day. Whether or not it reflects reality is not what you're looking at. You're looking at, this is what happened on this day under these conditions. The way to support a theory or a hypothesis is to retest and reevaluate it and to replicate studies so that over time you can see, are these things related? Are they correlated, which means related? I would look up correlation if you're confused what I'm talking about. But basically another thing is that I may not understand any of that, but I'll be searching and I might find, like when I was looking up, because I was at one point looking up whether or not DID existed, and I came across an article in, I think it was Psychology Today, which is like I think it's more like a magazine, I'm not really sure, but there was a guy who was like, oh, well, I've been working in psychology for X amount of years and I've been working with these other people and none of us have ever come across someone with DID. And my initial thought, because I have educational background in psychology, is this person's giving me anecdotal evidence for why he believes DID doesn't exist. He's saying, because I haven't experienced it and these people haven't experienced it, it must not exist. And if you are in the sciences, you know that anecdotal evidence means nothing because it's a very isolated, limited form of knowledge. So, like, that's why when you read publications, it's not people telling stories about their life. Like, if I want to know if a medication's going to work for me, I don't want my doctor to be like, well, it worked for me and I took it one time, so there you go. Like, that's anecdotal evidence. It doesn't mean anything in science. So, I wouldn't know that. I wouldn't be able to distinguish between the bullshit and the reality. I wouldn't be able to tell. Another thing that a lot of media gets wrong is they will take correlational studies or studies that show there might be a correlation between two things and claim a causal relationship. And you can't do that because you don't know what other third variables exist and you don't know if one causes that one or that causes the other one. Like, there's a directionality problem. There's a lot that goes into understanding what causes what and how things relate, and you have to know what to look for in terms of studies in general to know, is this a good study, first of all? Do you have the ability to tell if it's a good study design or not? Are their conclusions accurate do you feel their conclusions make sense based on what the results they've presented? Like, all of this stuff. There's so much. You can take entire courses on this either in undergraduate schools or in a grad school or whatever. If I was someone who didn't have any of that knowledge, I'm going to stumble across a lot of studies that don't really mean anything, but I'm going to just take it for granted and accept the ideas that they spread because I don't have background in psychology or science in general to understand how to read a study. So, my point in all that, and I believe I made another point, but I don't remember what it was in my little essay. But my point in all this is to say, if Tati is working with great scientists in the field and all this, no matter how great they are, there's always the potential for someone to do something wrong or to be wrong. And I am a human, so I get things wrong too sometimes. Like, it's just a thing. It's just humans are wrong. That's a thing. People mess up. Human error. She has the ability to Google information and she has the ability to maybe talk to other people in the field, but she doesn't have her own education background in any chemistry, biology, whatever. And when she is Googling things, she doesn't have the background knowledge to know how to find good information. So, and also, the thing I didn't mention is when you're in school, you learn where to look for good sources of information. So, like at most universities, there's like online databases, and you learn how to search in them, like where to find peer-reviewed stuff, how to do, and then you take classes and they teach you how to differentiate between good and bad stuff. They teach you about fraudulent studies and how to look out for potential fraud, meaning that the person took their actual data and changed it to go along with their hypothesis, which you're not supposed to do because that's lying. Not that I'm trying to start an argument about this, but a very famous case of a fraudulent study is when I forget his name, but he was the doctor who tried to claim that vaccines cause autism in children. And basically the reality is, well, one, he changed the information to make it look like that's what was happening when it wasn't, so that was just a lie in general. But two, children who are born with autism happen to present the signs and symptoms at the same age that children start to get vaccines. That doesn't mean that autism causes vaccines or vaccines causes autism. I would have to look into it, but you might be able to say they're correlated, but that doesn't tell you the third variable of the situation, if there is one, or if they're, like, I don't think they're actually related at all, if I'm pretty sure, because you can get autism without getting vaccines, and you can get vaccines without getting autism, so vaccines do not cause autism. And understanding, there's a term for that it has to cause the other every time it's present, and the thing has to not happen when the cause isn't present. So, like, I forget the word, I'll put it on the screen somewhere, but that I'm just bringing that up to say it's dangerous to be in a situation where there's fraudulent information or there's information that is not correct, because we all know that after that study came out, regardless of the fact that it was made known that it was fraudulent, and I don't know if you can get arrested for that. There were repercussions, and it was very well covered in the media about it. There are still people who will not vaccinate their children because they heard that there was a study done showing that it can cause autism, and they're afraid. And I understand the fear of not wanting to hurt your children, but I'm just like, that's not what this is about. I'm not trying to tell you to do one thing or the other. I mean, get your kids vaccinated if you want them to live, but you know what I mean. I'm not like trying to make this video about that. But my point is, without having any background information, there is no way to know all of these things that I know about. Debates in the field, how to find good research, what makes good research, what makes a study good, what makes it reputable, how to tell the difference between correlation and causal relationships, correlational and causal relationships. And there's so much information. Did I hit pan? No. Wait, maybe. I think I hit pan. Hold on. I'm gonna have to add this to my lower lash line to check. I gotta expand it. That's like so not serious compared to what I'm talking about. But my point being, if I had all that information, I would have the ability, when I'm talking to this doctor about my patient with dissociative identity disorder, and be able to, even if I don't have PhD level understanding, even if I'm not a clinical psychologist, I will have the ability to question and to, on my own, find the right information. And I feel that Tati doesn't have the education to... Ooh, I did hit pan. Oh my god, so exciting. Hold on. I don't know if you're going to be able to see. I hope it doesn't ruin the focus. I just don't feel like she has the knowledge to do... She doesn't have the knowledge to do either. So when she's working with these people, they can pretty much tell her anything, and she has a very small chance of being able to detect false information, which is in turn going to influence what goes into her products. And on top of that, and someone left a good comment on her video saying everyone's complaining about how she doesn't have background in it, but there are people who are starting makeup companies without knowledge of chemistry and this and that. And I completely agree, that is a good point. However, I feel that the difference is with makeup, generally you find a lab and they will have the general ingredients they work with. And then based on ingredients and makeup you have, like you can compare ingredients. You can be like, and usually they'll give you like a sample first. You can, from that sample, you sort of work your way towards higher pigmentation, higher blendability, or less, depending on what you're looking for. And you can also go off of what are common ingredients in makeup I like. So it's not easy, but it's a simpler process, from what I understand, than starting a vitamin from scratch. And there's different rules and regulations on what's considered a drug, what's considered whatever, what's considered food. To me, I like to think of it as a drug. It is a pill with chemicals in it that you ingest. To me, that's like a drug. The difference, however, that I made note of in my little essay, which I might put in the description of the video, because I think I did a really good job, is that by the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration for the United States, if you live elsewhere, there's going to be other regulations, but in America, in the United States of America, I don't know what they have in Canada, or Mexico, there is the rule that drugs have to be proven safe and effective before you can sell them, because they're drugs, and they are assumed unsafe until proven otherwise. Supplements and vitamins are assumed safe until proven otherwise, so you do not have to have them proven safe and effective by the FDA. Because of the regulations, I would feel safer buying drugs from Tati than I would her vitamins. And that's just the truth of it. I mean, we can all disagree or agree on whatever. The fact of the matter is, there's no government regulation. She doesn't have any background knowledge about chemistry, biology, pharmacology, whatever. She doesn't have a way to, because of that, she doesn't have a way to, you know how many governments have checks and balances? Like, it's like there's no checks and balances with hers, because she has no way to check what they're telling her. And even if she does try to Google the things they're telling her, like she said, a lot of people check on WebMD and there's a lot of false information. She has no way to know whether the resources she's checking with also have false information. So it's just a lot of trust. She has to put a lot of trust in these people. And then we're supposed to trust her in trusting them. And my point is, not only do I think it's more difficult than producing makeup, but I think it's more serious than makeup. Like, powder on your eyeball, although it can get into your eye and that can lead to a whole lot of problems. This video is not about eye-related diseases that can come about with things that get in your eye. But when it comes to things you're ingesting, that's really serious to me. And I don't feel like I would ever want to buy something that is a medication, whether it's a drug, supplement, vitamin. I don't ever want to take a pill that I ingest from someone who never went to school for anything related to that. I could be incorrect. She could have gone to school and learned something about science, in the fact that she would be able to find a way to check information. But even myself, as someone with the amount of education in psychology and biology that I have in chemistry, I wouldn't trust myself with something like that. And I'm pretty sure she doesn't have that, even the amount of education in it that I have on that, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because we all study different things when we go to school, or we all choose different career paths. I don't know if she went to college. I think she did. But, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying I wouldn't even trust myself. So I'm supposed to trust her. I feel like it's really inappropriate for her to be selling that kind of thing. Because of the fact that the only way to know if it's harmful or potentially could kill people is to wait and see what the people who buy it and try it think and see their reviews and if whether or not they die, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think they're lethal because she would have died by now. This is getting dark, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't think they're lethal because she's been taking them for a while and whatever. But, like, what are the long-term effects?